You are listening to the Billy D's podcast.
All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the program. If you are new here, first of all, we are primarily an interview and a commentary-based podcast. Today, my name is Billy D's, and on the program, I have Stacy Rogers. Stacy is running for governor of Kansas, and I'm going to say you're a special guest, and I'll tell you why, because I don't too often say that. It's a very cliche thing to say. We have a special guest on today. But I'll tell you why, and that is we get a lot of pundits on the program. I'm one myself, and a lot of people got something to say. A lot of them are very intelligent, very well-researched, all that stuff. But it's not too often that somebody straps on a helmet and goes onto the muddy field, and you are doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you're from Kansas. You're a business person. What business were you in? Are you in?
Yes. So I'm a business owner. I own a couple different businesses. I have a wedding and event venue. That's probably the most notable one. And it is the second longest running event venue in probably most of the state, but for sure around where I'm from, which is Wichita. And it's called Eberly Farm. And it's been running since the early 60s. And it was a working farm before that, that dates back to the 1800s. So it's, I've owned it for about 3.5 years. I'm the first person outside of the Eberly family to own it. And since the 1800s. So yeah, very exciting. And it's an iconic piece of Wichita. Most people know it because of, they went out there with a corporate event with their job, or they went out there on a field trip with their, their school. And so a lot of people know that from their childhood. So the other one that I own is called Kids Closet Consignment Sales. And it is a local sale that's been running for about 16 years. It's a pop-up that happens 3 times a year. And it's very community focused. And I'm very much about keeping things local, supporting local. And this supports our local community in a multitude of ways. And so I actually own that company. I run and operate that company, but I own the entire company nationwide. It's a franchise. And so I have about 26 franchises across the United States as well.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah. Now, if you would happen to win, and of course, we're hoping for you, we're wishing you the best. If you would happen to win, you would become the first female Republican governor in Kansas history.
That is correct.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, that is
correct. With your business background and everything, are you new to politics? Is this something, what drew you into this?
Yeah, so I did serve as a council member. I served until 2012 in a small town called Mount Hope. And so a whole 875 people, I believe, lived there at the time. And I did that for 6 years. And like I said, ended in 2012. So that's been my only political experience aside from voting and following, politics. And so when I decided to run, I had kind of been away from things for quite a while. And some people started to come back into my sphere. And I started to, really think about it and have some conversations. So in September of 23 was when I first ever thought about becoming governor. And it was the day that Laura Kelly, our current governor, decided that you could change your gender on your driver's license. And, I don't know how many times you get your driver's license out a day and look at it, or how many times you show it, you show it to someone else, but it's not something that I think would even occur on a weekly basis, sometimes not even a monthly basis. And right. So for our governor to take taxpayer time and money to put towards something like that, instead of paying attention to issues and things that could really affect our lives on a day-to-day basis, I was standing in my living room. I threw my hands up in the air and said, I can't take any more of this. I'm going to have to go be governor. And there was not one single moment prior to that I'd ever had that thought process. And since that moment occurred, it's never left me. It was imprinted on my heart, and I have went forward with it. And I started having conversations and talking with people in politics and not in politics, and found out very, very quickly my reason for running, which is the people of this state really do not feel like they have a voice anymore. They feel like they are discounted. They feel like they don't matter. They're not important, that nobody is working for them. We've had people, we'll call them career politicians, who have been in our legislature and working in our government for 20 plus years, and they do not feel like those people are representing them any longer. And that's unfortunate. There are some really good legislators, really, really good legislators. And then there's a few bad apples. There's a few people that are bought and paid for by special interests, by the lobbyists. And once that occurs, they're really not working for the people of this state anymore. And so what I'm seeing is, and what I'm hearing is, people are very frustrated. That's where I am as well. I'm a frustrated Kansan, and I want to see better for our state. So
interesting. Let's talk a little bit about Kansas. I'll tell you a little bit about, I'm in Ohio.
Yes.
And, I talk to people from all over the country, and I always hear, well, you guys got corn there. And yeah, we do.
Yeah, we have wheat.
I mean,
and corn.
Not around me so much, but you drive through Ohio and you're going to see corn. But I think one of the misconception is that we're sort of a flyover state. When the fact of the matter is, I think we're like number 7 in terms of the size of the economy. Obviously, California, Texas, Florida, New York would be bigger than us. We also have a very diversified economy. We have energy here. We have technology here. We have medicine here at the Cleveland Clinic and a couple of other really great hospitals. So there's a lot happening here, and of course, agriculture too. What would be some of the things about Kansas that people do not know?
Well, I think the most notable that we are known for is the being the air capital, Wichita, especially the air capital of the world. And so, of course, there's a lot of people in aerospace here. So we have multiple companies sitting in Wichita that are directly influencing the majority of the state. We have other things going on in the state, but that's probably the biggest and the most recognizable is the fact that we have so much. We have Cessna, we have Learjet, we have there's Boeing, there's all the companies. There's probably one of almost every major company in the United States or in the world is sitting in some way, shape, or form in Kansas. And so I think there's only a couple that are not involved in Kansas. So I think that's a big one. And of course, our farming we're definitely an agriculture state, especially when you go out west. I would say, eastern side is more aimed at the aerospace industry, and then the western side is more of our agriculture. And farming. And so those are probably the two big ones. There's a lot of other things that happen in our state, however, and those are probably the biggest. So
your fellow Republican Vivek Ramaswamy is putting his hat in the ring for governor of Ohio. So one of the things that I often get is Ohio. One of its big problems has been the opiate problem, and Ohio has been one of the hotbeds for that. If you're interested, you can check out some things online about some documentaries about why that is. What's one of the things that's really coming to a head for you there in Kansas?
So I think for us, we do definitely have a problem with fentanyl, a problem with some of those kind of drugs. And a lot of that links back to, unfortunately, human trafficking. And so we are a hub for human trafficking. We have I-70 and 35 that intersect in our state. And so that's a huge that's a huge deal they're coming up through Texas, and they're coming across from, in the Arizona area, Colorado area. And so we do have a lot of issues with that. And, that's definitely something that is a high priority for me. This past legislative session, they had a trafficking bill that did not make it, I believe, out of committee, which was frustrating and should have been top of the list. They passed the protection of children, the trans bill. They passed that, but second on their list should have been trafficking. And so the fact that it didn't even make it anywhere close, it was disheartening and frustrating, and just, we need to protect people, protect life.
Yeah.
And we're just not doing a good job of that at all. So
I can tell you, I work for a nonprofit, and a lot of the things we deal with involve mental health and addiction. And I've talked to a lot of people, as I'm sure you do. And it seems like everything these days, people want a simple solution. For example, the homeless crisis. If you listen to the far left on that, people are homeless because, rich people are just making the rent too high. And if you listen to the far right, they will say, well, people just need to go out and get a job. And I've been in some of these homeless service centers, and they've come through by the hundreds. And addiction is a problem in that community. So is mental health. But
right.
what I notice the most is this is a population that, how to put this, are just intellectually not capable of functioning in a modern society. They can't manage their own affairs, their doctor's appointments. A lot of them have been taken advantage of by their family. What little money they had has been taken from them. Whatever assistance they got has, whether it's their family or friends, or somebody has taken it from them. And this is a population that just giving them affordable housing isn't going to work. The talking points on both sides of this issue just simply don't work. Does a nuanced approach these days, do people hear it? Do they have the patience for you to, let's say, talk about the nuance of this? How do you get your message across?
Yeah. So just to give you a little bit of background on me, I actually have a 27-year-old autistic son. And he, one of my biggest fears the entire time he was growing up is, how do I prepare for the inevitable time when I'm not here anymore? And he has to navigate, or someone is navigating for him, the rest of his life, which could be another 40, 50 years after I'm gone. And that is truly terrifying in this day and age, because of the things that I have seen that happen to his friends, that happen to other people who are in that disabled or mental health community. And I'm able to stand in the gap for my son, but there's so many, you're right, there's so many people that are being taken advantage of. They're being harmed, they're being manipulated, they're being groomed, they're being completely taken advantage of, and some are even trafficked. And so I think that one of the things that we need to do is to really focus on, how do we protect the most vulnerable members of our society and help them. So I know addiction is an issue, and mental health is an issue. I personally, will hire people who are ex-felons, who are recovering drug addicts, who are people really trying to get their life together and need that, hand up, not a hand out, but a hand up to where they feel that they are valuable, where they feel that they are worth something. And I think that that's truly what's lacking. It is where people do not feel like their lives matter at all. They don't feel like they are valuable in any way because of, and it could be because of what somebody has told them. Maybe their family told them that, or maybe, I used to coach women about their business. And one time I remember sitting down with one of my people, and I said, the conversation was, what holds you back, stops you, or slows you down? And it always boiled down to fear. It's always fear. And so I'd make him go further, because fear comes from somewhere, right? We don't just we're not just fearful. And one lady that I sat down with, her fear came from, she said, well, I don't feel like I'm good enough. I'm afraid to do this. And I said, why do you not feel like you're good enough? She said, well, I remember I had this manager when I was in high school who told me I would amount to nothing. As a manager at Pizza Hut. And this is a 35-year-old woman married with children, working a great job. And I looked at her and I said, so you're telling me that you let a guy who may very well still be a manager at Pizza Hut rule your life 30 years later, 20 years later.
Sure.
And so we talked through that. And in that process, she went back to school and is now an executive in her position. And because she broke down that wall of allowing someone to tell her she wasn't worthy enough. And so I think that we need to have a conversation about how do we reach people to help them understand that they are valuable. Every life is valuable. And when you are given a purpose and a reason and a job, then you do have more value. You understand that value in yourself, what you can contribute to society. And I just think we've lost that a lot in this country and in this world. We have a handout mentality. I believe in smaller government. So I believe in, working and doing, putting things back into the hands of the people to give them back that power and that say so. And so, blanketing legislation from a state level across the entire state doesn't make sense to me. A lot of that stuff needs to go back to the counties and the cities and the people themselves to make those decisions about what is the best for their specific community. And so as I'm traveling, that's one of the things that I talk to people about is, how are you involved? What are you doing in your community to make it better? And how can you get involved? And so I think it's those kind of conversations. How do we help someone? I think a lot of the mental illnesses that we're experiencing today are they are things that can be overcome. And it's really on a value system. They don't feel like they are worth anything. And that contributes greatly to depression and anxiety and a host of other mental health issues, which leads to addiction, which leads to some of these other things that cause great problems in our society. So
yes, and I'm so glad I hear compassion in what you're saying, because so often, being in marketing around the mental health space is kind of tough, because first of all, people think about marketing, Steve Jobs, you're selling something, and it's a little different when you're working for a nonprofit or for a medical institution. It's about raising awareness, and that can affect, for example, your donations. It can affect how people vote on issues that are going to impact these things. And one of the things I will often hear is, well, that's a choice that they made. And I'm not going to say in a country of 300 million people that people don't party themselves into addiction. I'm sure it happens, but that isn't the path to it here in Ohio, and I'm sure it's not in Kansas. What you touched on, mental health is a big part of it. I had the privilege of working with a judge here in Ohio who was one of the first to notice a pattern. And rather than fall into the typical judge thing, I'll lock them up and throw away the key. I want to preface this. This was not people who had harmed anyone. This is not people who have trafficked. The only person that they hurt was themselves. He started to see a pattern, and he started a heroin group here in Ohio. And he told me that up to 80% of the people that they treat have had some kind of child abuse, and a lot of it is sexual
Wow.
child abuse.
Yes.
Uh, and even on an everyday basis, it's easier to become to fall into the pattern of addiction than what you may think.
Mhm.
I'll ask people, you've had a bad day at work. Okay, man, I could sure use a glass of wine. Man, I could sure use a beer. Man, I could sure use a cigarette. I could go on down the line or go, I'm going to order myself a great big pizza.
Right.
We all comfort ourselves. And most of the
Mhm.
time, I'm going to say it passes without incident.
Sure.
But then, it's not like a day where you just
Mhm.
became addicted. It's just like getting fat.
Right. Right.
It
Didn't
doesn't
happen
happen.
overnight. That's
Yeah,
right.
and pretty soon, the weekend rolls around. Boy, that wine made me feel pretty good. And then, I remember I have some leftover prescriptions when I had that root canal. Maybe all that. And the next thing you know, you're in big trouble. And then
Right.
sometimes it can
Right.
take 6 months. Sometimes it can take years. So, I mean, that's something I'm going to say it's sad that there's an awareness now in Ohio,
Mhm.
largely
Mhm.
because just about everybody has been touched by it.
Mhm. Well,
So it,
and look, this extends. Of course, we have a lot of military here as well, and so we have a lot of veterans, and so this. Anytime you pull on a string on one thing, you realize that it's connected to so many other things. So, let's talk about the veterans. Let's talk about the mental health of veterans. They're set up. The program when they come home, whether it be from a tour or whether it be from just their regular serving time, they're often not set up or equipped to re-enter normal civilian life.
yeah,
And they have PTSD, and they have a host of other issues that are not addressed well. And so we end up with they also end up in addiction. They also end up homeless. They also, at an alarming rate,
yeah.
we have that's homeless with mental health issues in drug addiction. And so and I've spoken with some that just really struggle day to day. They're functioning in society. You probably wouldn't even know that they're struggling, but the integration problem to feel normal
Hmm.
in that's a whole other thing. And then they start medicating, or they, like you said, they have a glass of wine, they take some prescriptions, and the next thing you know, they're in big trouble too. And they've lost their families, they've lost their jobs, they've lost their homes, and they end up in a lot of problems. And then you look at our foster care system, you look at children who from the get-go are put into a system that is broken. And I know lots of families that are really working really hard to truly love on children and to give them their best chance. But there's so many that do not get that chance, and they grow up in that system. And again, it leads to mental health problems and drug addiction. And some of them turn to things like, they turn to things like pornography, or they turn to, unhealthy behaviors to find their worth that they weren't finding other ways. And we just need to be aware of those things. And there should be, I don't want to say programs, there should be some way to um, teach better than what we're doing in these situations, whether it be for our veterans that are reintegrating into society from military to civilian life, whether it's the children that are in foster care or then aging out of foster care. Again, having to learn how to manage in as an adult in regular life. Um,
Hmm.
let's talk about the prison system. When we release prisoners back into society, we are not setting them up for success. We're setting them up to fail again. And so there's a lot of places in our society that I think are all tied to that mental health issue, and then which leads to drug addiction. And then, we have people that seemingly had an amazing life that make a couple wrong decisions, end up in addiction, and end up losing everything as well. So it's, I'm not bashing on any one group of people. This can happen to almost anyone.
Yeah.
And in the society we live in today, and unfortunately, we don't have supports We don't teach it in school well. We don't have places where they can go if they're struggling, truly struggling, and get that mental health support that they need before it becomes the major problem. What about, children who are being abused in their homes and the schools maybe aren't catching it? Some of these kids, I know a family in particular that I did not find out until they were adults that abuse had occurred repeatedly in the home. I would have stepped in and done something. I would have helped them, but I had no idea. And they did not, the children covered it up because they felt like that's what they were supposed to do. And they suffered in silence. And we live in a place that, does not offer those protections for those kids to this. The systems are broken is basically what I'm saying.
Sure.
That those systems are broken. So there's a lot of things that I feel like we have lost our ability to feel empathy towards people, to love people, to really serve people and meet them where they're at and help them through things like this. And so, I don't know that I have all the answers to that as governor of Kansas, but I definitely know that there needs to be some things looked at. And one of the things I'll tell you is I plan on creating a real Kansas Doge when entering office. And I do hesitate to use the word Doge because that's kind of been given a bad connotation in a lot of ways because of, people feel like, they've went in there and just lopped the top off of things and not really taken a good hard look over what that was going to affect, who that was going to affect, what the ramifications for some of that was going to be. And so that's not what I'm really talking about. I'm not talking about going into, every department in our state and just lopping the top off of it. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about going in and taking a very critical look at what is going on in each department and, making sure that we are not, misusing funds, that we are allocating them to the right places where they will be the most beneficial. We are looking at things, auditing to make sure that we're not being wasteful in any way. And then without losing value to what the citizens of this state need. So that's very important. We can go in there and hack away at departments, but if that harms in the process citizens of this state by losing services or much needed services, and we're taking away value, then we're not doing any good either. So there are things that we can do to make things work better and save money at the same time. So what's occurring right now is that our current legislature created a Kansas Doge. Well, we have a mostly Republican, we're Republican heavy in our legislature. And so that's great, but we have a Democrat governor and Democrat, department heads. And so a lot of information is being withheld, concealed, redacted when legislators request it. And it takes a very long time, even under our Open Records Act, to get information. And then it's not complete. And so to create a Doge at this point is a little bit premature, in my opinion, because once we actually are able to see everything, have it all laid out in front of us, we may actually find that it's going to cost the taxpayers more and cost more time because of what they're trying to do right now, working along the edges of what's available for them to even see and work with. And so that's my biggest concern on that. I think that we have to wait until we can actually see the full information. And so my intention is, is to lay that open for the people of Kansas to see, to be very transparent. One of the unique things about me is that I don't have a political baggage a mile long behind me that I need to be concerned about. And I'm not afraid of what might be exposed in that process of deep diving into these departments, like some of the other candidates are going to have. A lot of the other people running are longtime career politicians with a lot of political baggage behind them. And they do have, they could possibly have some concerns over things that would be revealed in the process of really deep diving into the departments and what's been going on for the last 20 plus years. And so you don't get that with me. I have nothing to hide. And in fact, I want to make sure that the people of the state see exactly what's been going on for the last 20 plus years in their government. So they deserve that.
Well, I can hear the passion in your voice, and I know before we get too far along, and I wanted to ask you about another passion that you have, which is education.
Yes.
I noticed that you, for a while, were into homeschooling and similar things. There must have been something that you felt was missing in the school system to go that route. So where do you want to start with that?
So I've been a public school, private school, and homeschool parent. So I have run the gamut on all the different ways that you can educate in the state. And my two youngest actually have learning challenges. And so I said earlier, I have a son with autism. He's 27, and my youngest is 22, and he is profoundly dyslexic and profoundly dysgraphic. And so lots of trouble reading and writing. And let me tell you, I would have thought that trying to teach someone with autism would be the toughest job I ever had. But trying to teach someone who is profoundly dyslexic and profoundly dysgraphic is way, way more difficult. It's like hitting a brick wall over and over. And so we've really worked very hard. I pulled my kids out. I had taken my middle son, my 27-year-old, out when he was at the end of his second grade year. And because the school system was not serving him well, I would go to parent teacher conferences and they would say, well, he did okay over here, but he totally failed with this. And I'd say, well, gosh, that's a problem. Oh, no, it's not a problem. He doesn't need to know it yet. And I say, then why are we teaching it to him? If he doesn't need to know it yet, then, you already know that he has challenges and struggles, and let's focus on the things that he needs to know right now and make sure that he has mastered that before we move on to the next thing. And they just, the way that they were handling his education, by the time that I pulled him out at the end of his second grade year, I realized very quickly I had to start him over all the way back at the beginning of first grade and educate him. And he had already been held back a year to kind of give him a better shot at education. And so the great thing about it, though, is that I graduated him on time. So at the normal time he would have graduated had he not been held back a year. He graduated on time. And that is a testament to one-on-one education and making sure that the child's needs and their education style is being met. And, did my autistic son make it as far as a normal functioning child? Maybe not. He made it to like pre-algebra. He was at a 12th grade reading level, but, he wasn't like a master scholar by any means at that age. He knew enough to go into the workforce. And so my youngest son, I pulled him out after his kindergarten year, and they had missed that he was dyslexic. And so it took me about a year of attempting to work with him to realize there was something not right in this scenario. And I had him tested, and in fact, that's what we figured out. And so I educated him homeschool until he was 8th grade. And at that point, we realized that we were kind of at a crossroads where we were kind of butting heads, and his education, he needed more than I could provide. And we found a private Christian school that met his needs perfectly. They had a school in a school where they would pull him out and teach him independently on the couple of subjects that he needed more help in. And today he has an associate's degree, and he is a diesel mechanic. And so I don't believe that would have occurred had he went through the public school system at all. They totally did not serve him well. And so, and I don't believe that my autistic son would have been as successful as he is today either. Now, I have an older son. He's 31. He's a CPA. He's my smarty pants, and he really didn't need any of my help at any point in time during his schooling. And that's a testament to the different education styles of children. And so why I'm passionate about education, let me give you a little background on Kansas. Our entire state budget, over 60% of it goes to education, and our children are failing. So I think it's like 23%. Don't quote me on this because I looked at this a while back, but 23% are not reading at grade level and at 4th grade when they test them, and 86%, I think that's right, are not at grade level in math in 8th grade when they test for that. And so that is very concerning. Yet we have rising graduation rates because there's no child left behind. So they just keep pushing them forward, which is what they were doing with my autistic son. He had not learned, was not learning appropriately, but they just kept pushing him forward. And so we have rising graduation rates and children that are graduating without the ability to read at grade level. And so we're setting them up for failure in society to go out and get a job, and we're not we need to be encouraging more trade work, where there can be apprenticeships and there can be things that meet the needs of non-traditional, I don't even want to say non-traditional students, because I don't think any student is traditional in the sense of each one of us is a unique human being that has a different way to learn. And so we just need to look at those things and stop pushing kids into college, which, we say a 4-year college. Well, there's no such thing anymore. A degree is 6 years plus now. And we're saddling these kids with decades of debt on top of that, because we're requiring classes that don't really have anything to do with their degree or their ability to do a job in society. And then we're sending them out in society, and they're not even able to get a job with the degree that they hold. And so we're really setting up lots of kids for failure. So education is a huge thing for me, because we are giving so much money out of our state budget to that. If our kids were not failing, I would not bat an eye at over 60% of our state budget going to education. But the truth is that they are failing. And in addition, 40% of that budget is going to administration. It is going to superintendents, and we are making millionaires out of superintendents in this state. And that money is not reaching our teachers, much less our students. And so a lot of times you'll hear, you must be against teachers. Oh no, I'm for teachers. Teachers are the victims here too. And they are not given the tools. They are not given what they need to educate properly. And in fact, right now, they're not even being educated properly themselves to hold that teaching degree to teach these students. And they're set up for failure. So we just have a broken system that needs to be again looked at with and looked at with a fine, a magnifying glass and gone over with a fine tooth comb to find where those things can be, money can be reallocated to better serve our students and their success.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know much specifically about Kansas, but I know a lot of other states. People they're spending a mountain on money on education, and the teachers don't make anything, and the kids aren't learning anything. Where is it all going? So interesting. I will ask you this before we wrap things up about autism, and this is kind of was a national subject a couple of weeks ago. RFK Jr. He made a remark about autism being an epidemic, and a lot of people got really upset about that. He did clarify in his remarks, if you go back and look, as far as the critically ill ones, they're like 20% where they need constant care. He didn't make a sweeping statement and say all. Nonetheless, he was criticized on two fronts. Number one, that the diagnosis of autism has become broader in recent years, so therefore the numbers have gone up. That's the first thing he was criticized on. The second thing he was criticized on, and I didn't get this one at all. I mean, if I say the flu's the epidemic, I'm not dehumanizing people who get the flu, but a lot of people thought that the remarks were dehumanizing to people who have autism. Okay, what is your reaction to that? How do you take? What is your take on that?
So I don't know that I saw his remarks. So I don't know that I can speak 100% on what he said and whether it was dehumanizing or not, but doubtful. When we're talking about autism rates, I do believe they've went up, and I believe that it's environmental. I believe that it's directly related to our food. I believe that it's directly related to medications. I believe there's a lot of factors that are genetically predisposing children to end up on the spectrum. Okay. And when I look at my child, so one of the things I'm very much about functional medicine, get to the root of the problem, what's causing this issue versus can we just medicate it? And sometimes people are like, well, who do you think you are to be speaking on that? Well, I have 15 years of pharmacy background. I worked in hospitals and medical facilities, another 5 years on that. I don't carry any degrees, but I am the person that whenever I have a job, I learn every single thing that I can about it to ensure that I'm doing the best possible job that I can. And so when I worked 15 years in pharmacy, I asked questions. I would sit and talk with pharmacists about the molecular structure of these medications and how they affect the body. We could get into a very deep subject about what crosses the blood-brain barrier and what effects different medications have on your body versus your brain. The same thing with food. And what I figured out was, my son, and I educated people on this throughout the state. I was a parent match through a place called Families Together for 20 years. And I educated families on food and how they could heal and help their children through food. And so we were gluten-free and casein-free, which are the wheat and milk proteins. Okay. And in some people, these wheat and milk proteins actually metabolize into a drug type substance. So it's like glutamorphin. I don't know the whole word. Like it's a really long word. But morphine. Okay. And caseinomorphine is basically, so it turns into a drug in their system and it affects them. You would see cases where children would seek out products containing gluten that were non-food products, so makeup, detergents, things like that, and eat it because it contained gluten, specifically mostly gluten. And they would basically be trying to search out that drug interaction. And once you cleared that from their system, you saw clearer minds. And I remember when we started the gluten-free, casein-free diet with my son, Um, I remember that we were sitting and watching TV one night, and he turned to me and asked me about something that was on the TV. Now, that may seem insignificant, but if you're a parent of a child with autism, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. That did not occur ever. You did not have conversations about current things happening. You might hear about it 3 weeks from now on repeat like a broken record, but you did not have a conversation about it in the moment. It did not occur. And so I knew right away when that happened. That was probably only about 10 days after starting this diet. I knew I was onto something, that I could improve this child's ability to function in the real world through food. And so I applaud. RFK is saying now what I've been saying since 2004, what other people have been saying for decades. And it really is a problem, number one, in our food system, in our medicine. And, I'm going to have big pharma hating my guts now, but I have always been the person who said, how do we look for the root cause of this and approach it through food and through supplements, healing the body from within, behavior modification, exercise, all of the things that we get told all the time we should do. Those truly are the things that will heal and cure your body. I'm a sufferer. I had Lyme disease, and I contracted that. Well, it was diagnosed back in 2013, and I healed myself through things like essential oils and alternative medicines, red light therapy, sauna therapy, massage therapy. And I took a very non-traditional route, because the traditional route was to ply me with IV medications and just very strong antibiotics that really tear your system down after a while. And so, again, my child ended up being one of the very few children of his time that was not on a mood stabilizing drug, that was not on a plethora of medications. In fact, he was on a couple of very interesting things. One was minocycline for his acne, and minocycline crosses the blood-brain barrier, and it actually had an effect on aggression with him. Now, they'd never heard of that before, but I found a study that linked it back to Lyme disease, which we knew that he probably had as well. And so there's some very interesting things where, and I'm not saying that all medicines are bad. I'm saying that there's a time and a place for those medications, but we use it as the go-to. And really all we're doing is band-aiding the symptom instead of addressing the cause. And, there's plenty of people out there that have addressed the causes of their issues and have seen dramatic life changes because of it. So I think RFK, while again, much like Trump, maybe his method of speaking, his way he's going about it may feel more like a bull in a china shop, but what he's attempting to do is right on track. And so parents in the autism community, I welcome that conversation, because I have a long history of healing my child from within versus plying with medication from the outside. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. So
I enjoy computers, and what the old phrase, there's an app for that. These days there's a pill for that.
That is correct.
And we pop a pill. There's an easy way, and the best way sometimes is a little bit more a little bit more involved than just popping a pill. But you get better results. And it's been great talking to you. We have been talking to Stacy Rogers, who is a candidate for the governor of Kansas. That you're shooting high. That's a high, a big role. Where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, so the easiest thing to do is just Google Stacy Rogers for Kansas, and you're going to find every social media platform that I'm on. And so whatever social media platform you enjoy, you'll find me there. So even Snapchat, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Rumble, YouTube, Truth Social, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. And I do have a website as well. It's Stacy Rogers 4ks.com. And so any way that you want to connect with me, I personally answer every text message, every Facebook message, every email. And I want to talk to people. I do want to say one more thing before we go.
Sure. Absolutely.
One of the things that I think, and this can be very controversial, is number one, I believe in term limits. I believe that we need to have term limits for our legislature, not only at the state level, but at the federal level. But also, in addition to that, I believe that there should be a cap on the total dollar amount that you can spend on a campaign. And the reason for that would take big money out of our politics in a hurry. And so that's number one reason. Number two reason I believe that should happen is that it will allow true servant leaders to rise up. And we have some amazing people in Kansas that do not have the financial means, do not believe that they could get the financial means to run a campaign, but they are incredibly wise, smart individuals that could make amazing changes for this state. The third reason why I believe we should have those limits is because it would force the candidates to get out in front of the people voting for them and answer their questions directly. I won't say about who doesn't do that currently, but we have a pattern, and I'm sure it's in every state. You can see this pattern. We have a pattern of hiding behind the commercials and hiding behind the campaign flyers instead of answering the questions. And often you'll see politicians that when the questioning gets too tough, they will cut and run and not stay and answer those questions. And that's a travesty. And I think if you cap that amount that you can spend on a campaign, you would force those candidates out in front of their constituents, and people would find out in a hurry who really deserved their vote and who did not. And I think that would be, we'd see a huge change in our politics today.
Yeah. Biden said one thing that kind of made me go, and he didn't do that very often, but he talked about some kind of a limit for Supreme Court justices, whether it be 20 years, whatever. And I'll tell you what, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, for example, she was on the table being embalmed, and she was still sitting on the Supreme Court. Right. I don't know that those appointments have to be like the Pope, where you're there until you drop. I don't know that that's the best thing. And regardless of what your political leanings may be, I don't know that should be a partisan discussion.
Well, we have a unique situation here in Kansas, and I'm glad you brought this up, because we actually have a vote coming up on at our primary date in August of 26. We are the only state in the country that appoints our Kansas Supreme Court in the manner that we do. And that is currently, it was a knee-jerk reaction to something that happened back in the late 50s it's called the triple play. You can Google that. I won't go into the whole history of it. The triple play in Kansas, but basically it caused a blowout of thought processes and a change to our Constitution to where no voter in this state has any say. Has any say in the selection of our Supreme Court. They are selected through a committee that's appointed by the Bar Association. And then there are candidates presented to our governor. Our governor can only say yes or no. And if she or he does not like the people presented, she can say no, but they'll just bring more bad choices to her. And if ultimately, after a while, if she says no enough times and refuses to appoint, that committee, my understanding is that committee has the power to appoint for her. So a lot of people don't understand that this is the way that functions in Kansas. And in fact,
Wow.
they thought they had the voting right because they have the right to vote for retention. And that is not the same thing, because if they vote them out, okay, and again, they're basically lifetime appointments. If they're not voted out, they stay in forever. And but if they are voted out, then again, we go back to that process of where there's just several potentially really bad candidates that are given to the governor to select from. And so what the vote that is coming up in our primary election, it will be putting that power back in the hands of the people. Now, I think that there needs to be a huge education process of who these judges are that want to be on our Supreme Court prior to that, the general public voting for them. But we had a poll go out, and 75% of the people of the state said that they would prefer to be the ones voting for the Supreme Court. And so what I'm doing now as I'm going out and talking is, again, educating people about that particular issue, because most people thought that they actually had a say in that voting process, and they do not. And none of our elected officials, which we have elected to do that kind of job, has the say either. And so that's a big problem in my opinion. So
interesting. Fascinating conversation, Stacy. Thank you so much for joining us. You're going to have to join us again. You're going to have to come by and say hello again. Stacy Rogers, just Google candidate for governor of Kansas, and all kinds of good stuff comes up. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening, everyone. My name is Billy Dees. The Billy Dees podcast, you can find it on any major podcast platform. We have a 10-year history. And I guess social media, Billy Dees on X, which was at one time Twitter. That's kind of like my social media home. And we do have, I just started it. It's not very big. The Billy Dees podcast Facebook page is available as well. Thank you very much for listening. And we will talk to you again very, very soon.
Do you listen to music or audiobooks on streaming devices such as Sonos or Amazon speakers? How about on your car sound system? If you use Spotify, Audible, or Amazon Music on any of these systems, you can also listen to the Billy Dees podcast the same way. Billy and his team go the extra mile to make sure our podcasts sound as good or better than anything on the radio. Listening to the Billy Dees podcast has never been easier. You literally just have to ask.